we will be talking about lessons I learned from building a multi-platform data ingestion pipeline. Please let me know if my slides are clear enough. My name is Ejuro, and I'm a full working as a software engineer for almost 7 years now. I work at intersection. I work at the intersection of yeah. I guess that's me. I am married. I love cycling a lot. Um, and I am a three times founding engineer. I built products across EV, fintech, edtech, and clean tech, quality, air quality. And I'm going to be sharing my experience from building a platform with so much data ingestion, which has data ingestion at the core of the solution and business. So yeah, yes, essentially, I came up with a table of contents that just kind of like flows on how I will give us the central point of our data ingestion pipeline of what we built, and then also some of the bottlenecks we fixed as we were scaling. Um, yeah, I'll give us an overview of what we built, business requirements, how our business requirements drove our architectural decisions, and how clean abstraction helped us at scale, and then how we came up with a sort of hybrid decision for how we want to ingest data into our system, and realities we faced, and some of our learnings and key takeaways. Please, if at any point you can't hear me, let me know. Okay. So yeah, like I said before, so we talk about scaling challenges, advanced patterns, clean abstraction, and then we will talk about technical journey of what we initially built and where we are migrating to, and where we've actually migrated to, and for some parts where we will be migrating to. So yeah, so essentially this is what we've built, right? We built a platform that allows organizations to monitor their brands, their competitors, and do industry analysis at scale. So you have some sort of keywords. Let's say you're building a brand and is in the industry of, let's say, security or web deployment, right? So you could monitor those keywords, you could monitor the name of your brand or company, right? And then when people mention it across multiple platforms, currently we are tracking 11 platforms. We send you notifications based on priority, so you could track how your brand is doing on social media and on the web. So based on different priorities, we are sending notifications to your Slack or email or whatever configuration you have, or webhook, whatever configuration you have that you want to receive notification on priority mentions only. So yeah, um, at the core of what we were building, because we were ingesting data from about 11 sources, we were facing pipeline from 11 sources where about half of them are paid and kind of like expensive, right? How are we going to do that and actually break even from how we want to do our pricing and how we want to create our business model, right? So when ingesting data from 11 sources, from Reddit, LinkedIn, Twitter X, Blue Sky, YouTube, DevTool, GitHub, Hacker News, Stack Overflow, newsletters, multiple sources of newsletters, and then podcasts. We're using two sources to get access to millions of podcasts. So we were doing quite a lot of data ingestion, and we really needed it to work at scale. Now, on average, we're ingesting for each organization. For each organization, we're ingesting about 1,100 posts per day for organization and 7.7 thousand posts per week. And here on my right here, you could see sort of like keywords you could monitor, and each organization had an average of 5 keywords, right? Some had more than 5, but and then we had different layer of data processing after the ingestion, different layers of data processing. The data is going to run through before the user actually gets to see them on their feed. Now, per platform, we had per platform 5 keywords, resulting in 20 results, which is an average of 100 posts from just one platform. So, for example, our expectation initially was from Reddit for a particular keyword, right? We will get 20 results for a particular keyword per day, and that will result in 100 posts. So, yeah, like this is the calculation. And across 11 platforms, 100 monitoring 11 platforms will give us 1,100 posts per day. So, bottom line of it was we from the onset we knew that we were going to be ingesting quite a lot of data, even by just having 5 organizations onboarded. So it was not really a matter of how fast are we going to scale, because one organization joining us essentially changes the curve of quite a lot of data is going to be ingested, because just that keyword, we have to get data from 5 different platforms. So yeah, just a second. Okay. So yeah, so what we ended up doing was we allowed the business requirements to decide on what architecture we should follow, right? So we talked about what was important, right, to the core of what to decision, and not the other way around. Now, what we came up with in how we want to get data or ingest data into our system, right? What should be the priority based on research we did from our users, right? And then we had this platform economic metrics, where we were thinking about, for example, now let me go back. Reddit, for example, now the cost of ingesting data into our system from Reddit is fairly cheap compared to LinkedIn, compared to Twitter, right? So we had to come up with like, okay, what is peak hours for these platforms, right? And how does their pricing work, right? We're doing all this because we really wanted to initially, from the onset, we don't want to have so much margin and then we have to make a lot of changes just to breach the margin. So, and then we had to come up with a priority pyramid, which is number 3, a priority pyramid, which based on that we will be ingesting data into our system. We'll be scheduling and ingesting data into our system. So yeah, starting with the priority pyramid. Now, we had 3 types of keywords, right, which is the pyramid. And the first was brand mention, competitor tracking or competitor intelligence. Then we had market intelligence, right? So we can't just get all the data. We had to decide which is most important to organization or our users per time, right? Brand mention obviously is extremely important. We had to schedule this to get data from this system more frequently than the others because we want you to know how your brand reputation is almost real time, right? We wanted you to know almost real time if you are having a negative brand perception on Reddit, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, right? We wanted if your tool or your product is at disadvantage at any point, we wanted you to get almost or near real time notification of your brand perception. And then computer tracking, we're doing 15 minutes, and we built a notification system, a smart notification system where we want to tell you to put your brand in front of your competitors when they are not doing so good, right? So if someone is having like negative feedback about a competitor's product, we want to let you know uh, so you could put your product in front of that conversation online, right? So essentially, we are growing to the point of tracking millions of conversations online and filtering out the noise for you, and then only giving you meaningful conversations online where you can put your brand on or speak about your brand or get to know what people are saying about your brand. And then we're doing market intelligence, right? We we look at your brand, right? And we look at the common terms that people use to identify your brand, right? And with those keywords, right, we ingest data into our system and we run them through our processing pipeline, and we send you a lot of notification based on market intelligence. So that's it for for a priority system we built. Now, here's how essentially it works, right? We wanted our queue system or our scheduler actually to have um, um, different level of urgency, right? So when we schedule a particular, when we run a scheduler to get data from a particular source, right? Like I said before, we want brand mention to be at the top of it. If someone mentions your brand, right, we want that particular job to run as a priority. It should run as a priority, get through the processing pipeline to a database, and then gets rendered to your feed. And if there is need based on organization configuration, if we have to send you notification instantly based on your configuration, or we schedule it maybe periodically, hourly, or daily, then we send notification accordingly. And then we get to store the data into our system. Competitors, 15 minutes, and then we have term hourly. So we kind of like built this queue architecture where it is priority driven based on what we consider to be priority for each organization. Now, this is our platform economic metrics. Just a second here. So this is our priority, our platform economic metrics. Now, our platform economic metrics, it matters a lot because each platform has different economics, and that's the thing about just building a product or a software. And when you're building a SaaS, a software business, you have to think about the pricing, right, of the providers you are using, because you don't just want to burn credits at scale. I mean, when you are dealing with really, really, really large amount of data ingestion, you don't want to ingest thousands of data that you don't need at this particular time, right? Because the data we are dealing with, they are time sensitive. There's no point of you ingesting data from 5 weeks ago when a user has been on your platform for over 2 weeks, right? So we want to give you recent data at all times. Now, excuse me. Um, each platform, like I said, for each platform, they had different economics and optimal pooling times. right? Two things, right? The API cost, and you have to think about it. What's the optimal pulling time? At what time of the day does it make sense for some platform for you to pull for a particular organization? So, in a platform like LinkedIn, right, very expensive, right, and they have very strict limits and data policy, and you would you wouldn't want to be pulling data at the end of business day, right? So you would want to focus your schedulers, right, to run during peak business hours of the day, right? So that's where you want to target to get the most amount of meaningful data from a platform like LinkedIn. So for a platform like Reddit, Reddit runs all through the day. Like people literally don't sleep on Reddit. Conversations, they are always going on, right? So for a platform like Reddit now, we don't just schedule for just once in a day because it's not as expensive as LinkedIn. So we run for per organization or even globally when we are ingesting data globally, and also when we are doing per organization data ingestion, we we do it consecutively, and the time frame is usually short. We could run it between 5 minutes and then 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on how much data we get from the last pool we did. So if we discover that your brand perhaps doesn't have more mention as often as possible, right? If it comes back with after the next pagination, it's always coming, or maybe after the first pagination, we don't even get the first set of data we are expecting. We're expecting 20 data, 20 results rather. We are getting, let's say, five, right? We don't run the next one. Wait for a much later time to run per organization. So you have to consider the platform economics and then also the optimal pulling time based on how each platforms are built. Now, for a platform like Stack Overflow, the generous, they have a free quota you could use to pull data as often as possible. For a platform like YouTube, they have some kind of limits, right? But it's still easy for you to pull data more frequently. Akan News, generous, they have free. Twitter and X, not so much. It costs a lot of money to get data from Twitter X, right? And also they have kind of like different rate limit. So what we essentially did at the end of it all was we had to consider peak hours, we had to consider optimal pulling time, we had to consider the different economics of each platform, and that led us to building a system based on these factors. Now, next, we are going to talk about is how abstraction helped us at scale, right? And I think for a very long time, this is one of the benefits I've seen of why whenever I'm starting a new project, I'm careful about my architectural decision, especially for a project that's I'm going to be building for a very long time, right? Clean architecture from the onset is important, right? Not just writing it, shipping slopes, and then you're finding it hard to maintain or scale. Now, we are building for 11 different platforms, and over time, we're going to be adding more platforms. We're going to be adding Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm going to be ingesting data from all these platforms, right? But we're starting with 11. But we know for sure that users are already requesting to have multiple platforms. They want to get data from other platforms we don't have available. Now, for all these 11 platforms, we don't have Facebook, we don't have Instagram, we don't have TikTok, and so many more, right? So we needed to write our code so that whenever we're adding a platform, right, it's more or less like we are filling a form, right? You just like fill a form, you submit, and voila, you don't essentially have to make any changes to the front end. I mean, literally on the front end, you just have to make changes to the back end. It just looks like filling out a form, you submit the form, and then everything gets generated and it works perfectly, right? So that's what we needed because this is at the core of our business logic. 1 second, please. Yeah. So we essentially, above every other thing we built, right, two of our abstraction, they stand out, and that's our ingestion provider and our normalizer, right? We designed two simple interfaces for our ingestion provider. One is to get the platform, then the other is to search. Now, the search just returns, it just goes to the third party, calls the third party API, gets data from them, and then returns data, whatever formats the platform provides. Now we have a normalizer. A normalizer essentially just gets the data in whatever format it is and renders and just formats it into what will fit into our system for users to view on their feed. Now, essentially, if you look at the diagram on the right here, we have ingestion provider, we have normalizer, and we have all these platforms. And all these platforms, we're going to get data from all these platforms, normalize them into a unified pipeline. So essentially, that's what we ended up building. Okay. Yeah, and then essentially this is an example of Redis implementation of both our normalizer and our ingestion service for Reddit. Like I said, we had for our ingestion provider, we had two methods: get platform and then search. Search just goes in, call the clients, gets data, and then returns the data. Now we have a normalizer. A normalizer, essentially what it does is it takes whatever shape of data is coming from yeah, I have 8 minutes. Okay. It takes whatever shape of data we have from our data ingestion pipeline, and it standardizes it into a canonical post, right? Into a structure and a standard for us. And then we needed to build an escape hash, which I'll talk about later. Now, this is our escape hash, what we call the canonical post model, right? We had one format for all our platforms, for all the data coming in from different sources from all the platforms, Reddit, Twitter, LinkedIn, and whatnot, right? And we needed to create an escape hash, and that became our metadata, where we needed some platform-specific data. We needed some platform-specific data to be saved at, right? And that metadata was our escape hash. It was a JSON kind of like field, yes. So yes, back to this. So we needed to make a decision of whether we want to ingest data globally or we want to scope them to organization. I'll just scroll over to this. Yes, just to explain this more. Now we have an organization here. For example, now the organization is Vercel. Now we needed to make a decision based on the pros and cons. Do we want to ingest data for all the platforms, for all the keywords in Vercel, for example? Do we want to ingest them for just Vercel and focus on Vercel and give them kind of like quality enrichment, and based on the organization config, we ingest data for them, right? Or we just want to ingest data globally and then scope them based on if they match an organization. So it was a lot of things for us to consider, right? And we came up with kind of like a hybrid approach. And the reason for the hybrid approach was not because we were indecisive. It was because it was the most pragmatic option for us to go. If we do globally, there are some quirks, especially with how we want to do our pricing. If we do organization scope, there are some quirks, but maybe we could live with that. So we decided to go with kind of like a hybrid approach, right? So for some platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, right, we did usage-based pricing, where each organization pay for what they use, and we ingest data for the organization, right, to org scope. Then for free APIs and not so expensive APIs, we did global data ingestion, right? And then we will have web, and especially we also did free uh, global data ingestion where there are high keyword overlap. And now, how this affects the entire system we are building is if two organizations are tracking a keyword, say artificial intelligence, right? It makes no sense for us to be making two API calls for 11 platforms for the same keywords and getting duplicate data. So we needed to create a hybrid approach where we could both combine organization scope and global data ingestion. So that was kind of like the approach we ended up with. So it's a bit of both pricing and keyword duplication. So we combined both and we came up with an architecture that kind of like works for what we're building. Now, scaling realities. Now, if you look at this is graph from data ingestion growth. Now, each of these steps mostly they occurred when we onboarded a new organization, or we added a new platform, or keywords are being added, right? So the growth was kind of like fast because for each organization we onboard, they come with an average of 5 keywords for 11 platform. We had to ingest 7,700 on average data per week for them. So we faced some realities, and the first of them is a queue evolution. We were using BullMQ to as our messaging queue, but we found we kind of like hit a kind of like limitation when we're ingesting more than 10,000 posts per day. Not like Bull can't do them, but it's kind of like made uh, our work difficult for us to oversee our orchestration pipeline and our workflows from as engineers and also as founders. Now, as we grew, we needed better workflow orchestration, and then we had to migrate off of. We were caught between ingest and temporal, but eventually we had to migrate off of uh, to ingest. We had to use ingest. Developer experience was smooth. We had to developer experience was smooth, TypeScript based, and it has all these. So here's like the advantages and disadvantages of. Sorry, I'm rushing because of time. Advantages and disadvantages of both, not just general, but how this was better than the other based on our experience and what we were building, right? Bull was like the best choice because it was fast and easier to integrate for us initially, right? But one of the issue we had was we wanted to build workflow, right? We wanted to build workflow on top a pipeline, and Bull will not really give us what we need if we want to monitor each stage of our processing pipeline or our workflow orchestration. Bull will not give us that ability to visualize, see where things are going wrong. So it kind of like failed there. So we had to, that was the primary reason why we had to migrate, right? So ingest just works for us and it works perfectly, though it's expensive, but it's totally worth the money. So how many minutes do I have? So key takeaways for for this, right? So I think for us, the biggest key takeaway was we allowed our business priorities drive architectural decisions and not just we wanted to use Kafka or we wanted to use Redis or we wanted to use uh, a fancy technology, right? We allowed what we were building, right, the core of our business to affect the architecture and not the architecture deciding what our business priorities could be. And clean abstraction from the onset, it really paid us because we were adding more platforms. We started with 11 platforms initially. We had to build some backups of some sources we were fetching for. We had to have like two sources for the same, two providers for the same sources, just so we could have like backup and fail safe whenever a provider is not available, right? So clean abstraction really paid us because it felt like we were just filling a form. You could actually give a junior engineer to add a new platform which is at the core of our business logic and they will do it easily because of how abstractions were designed. And hybrid approach they are valid, right? It doesn't mean you are indecisive, right? They could actually pay off and they could actually make a lot of sense where you are caught between this or this, right? It doesn't have to be this or this most of the time or some of the time. It could be both, right? Just find the overlap and focus on what matters to your business. Now, um, key infrastructure, if you are ingesting a lot of data like we were doing, right, it matters only at scale, right? Makes no sense for, maybe it may not make any sense for you to be renting that part out at very early stage of whatever you're building, right? For example, if you're just using BullMQ to maybe send email or process images, but you don't do that so often, you could stick with it, right? But if you are doing a lot of data ingestion and you are going to be using a lot of messaging queues, maybe it makes sense to outsource it and have a provider do that for us. For us, it was ingest, and we allowed growth lead us there, and not just because we wanted to use a fancy technology. So yeah, that's that. So our final thought is understand the problem deeply before writing code, right? And the best architecture, they really emerge from understanding business priorities, not just following trend or reading a particular blog architecture and then you want to bring things in. Thank you all for your time. Any question? You can find me on Twitter, X, GitHub, at Ejiro Codes, LinkedIn, Idrasu, and here's my email. Yes, I think that's all for now. Okay, yeah. So you are asking, okay, how do you know peak business hours? Okay, peak hours and business hours are okay, location dependent. Yes, it's okay. Let me use LinkedIn as an example. Peak hours, they are business hours, 9 to 5. Most, no, not 9 to 5 essentially. So it's peak hours is usually around 12 to 5, right? 12 to 5 starts at 12 to 5. Peaks a lot around 1 2 p.m. And yes, for this we have there are two things, right? Now it's by 12, but that 12 is in UTC 0. So if you want to scope it to, so that was why we came up with we came up with a hybrid approach. So if you want to scope it to per organization now, you have to get organization config to determine how you schedule file. So that was part of the dilemma we were facing. So we wanted to give businesses or organization or workspaces rich data enrichment and data pooling. So each organization had their config, and based off that config, depending on how expensive the API is, for LinkedIn, we decided not to use, we just used a UTC 0 just to be on the safe side to schedule for peak hours. But here's the thing now, if for a less expensive API, if we are doing organization data pooling, scoped per organization, we get the organization config, and based on that organization config, we fetch data for them based on their config, so based on their time, based on their location. So the next question is, um, did you face any bottleneck that was language based since you guys use TypeScript? No, 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 no. I don't think we faced any bottleneck that was programming language related. No. So I guess that's it. That's all the question for now. So any other question?